Hi, welcome to the Bytes podcast today. This is a Cyber Insights episode on data security. I'm Lorna Burrows. I'm a cybersecurity solution specialist at Bytes and joined here today by Rich. Hi, Rich.
Yeah, hi. Thanks very much for having me. So I'm Rich Beckett. I work for Netskope. So this is all around secure access service edge. So the convergence of security and networking services. And I'm kind of lucky enough where my job is to look at the solutions that we offer across verticals and compliance. So a lot of the business initiatives kind of come back to compliance. So as you can imagine, data is pretty foundational and data security is foundational into those two areas. So yeah, good to be here and excited to talk about data security.
Thanks so much for joining us today. So I think data security is a concept that has been around for a while, quite a long time, and we've gone through many different iterations of how organisations should be securing their data. How do you think that's evolving into 2025? That's what I'm interested in, I think, at the moment, is how that landscape's changing and how data security has changed over the years and its complexities for organisations.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's really, I suppose what's changed this year and what's growing now is just how pervasive data is right now and how interconnected all the different services and applications that you're running are. So, you know, you've got so many different places where data can be hidden, if you like, can be worked on, collaborated on, whether it's SaaS or public cloud infrastructure, private cloud infrastructure, on premises, a lot of different places where data can be and how it's communicating with one another. I think where that data is now is around 60%. I think with the latest stats, 60% of an organization's data is going to be in the cloud.
Yeah.
And so for me, there's probably two dimensions around areas that we need to be focused on. I think number one is going to be around SaaS. Everyone is using SaaS services, these applications. But what tends to happen, you get this bucket, right, that everyone just calls it SaaS and that's it. But think of it as three different aspects, really. You've got your corporate applications that I know about, and that we may have data protection controls in there already, you might have access controls already in place. But then you've got this like mirror of those applications. So like the personal versions of them, like you've got, you might have OneDrive for work, you might have your Outlook.com free account, and that's got OneDrive as well. You might have Google Drive for work, you might have Google services at home as well. And that little innocuous like share icon in there can be so dangerous because data can move so easily between the two. So that's kind of one kind of further level down, if you like, within SaaS. And then you've got the shadow IT stuff. So the apps that IT security teams have no visibility of whatsoever. They've been adopted for particular little requirements within teams or have moved over from personal life into business. So don't think about it as one. Think about it as three sort of different layers, if you like, of SaaS. I think you. Oh, sorry, go on.
No, that's fine. I was going to say, it's the convergence, really, isn't it, of data that's work data, personal data, and really trying to secure that landscape where there's no hard edges anymore. It's blurred. And I think you touched on one thing there about visibility. And when we're talking to organisations, we always want to start with visibility, because we find that, or we know that you can't secure something if you don't know what you're securing, if you don't know where your data is or how it's being used, then you can't secure it in an effective way. So I think visibility is always where we like to start the conversations when it comes to data security. But how do you find that achieving visibility is becoming a challenge for organisations now? And why is that more complex than ever to achieve visibility?
I mean, think about it from, like, if we take that idea of that everything's moving to the cloud and everything's kind of, a lot of your data's in SaaS applications, for instance, these days, the traffic itself has fundamentally changed. So you're not using websites as much anymore. If you had to think of a graph, it's kind of like we've converged and split straight over between a lot of organizations are now moving to SaaS. And if you think about what a SaaS app is, kind of like a glorified front end for a database, right? So a lot of those SaaS applications are just communicating via APIs these days. It's not a website that all your legacy kit can understand HTTP and HTTPS really well. It's all APIs. And so you need a different type of solution for that. A lot of that traffic's also encrypted, which you'd want it to be, right? Around 90% of traffic is now encrypted. And that's where all the threats and all the data is hiding. Now, the challenge is, like a lot of the recommendation is, well, let's not decrypt that traffic. Let's not inspect that traffic, particularly like the big names in SaaS, for instance, because you're going to get in the way of the user's journey. You're going to slow it down. Mm-hmm. And that kind of fundamentally comes why SASE becomes so important, because if I can converge those security and network services, if I can give you a security stack and network stack at every different point of presence around the world, wherever I'm accessing those destinations, like those SaaS apps or public cloud infrastructure, whatever it will be, wherever I'm accessing it, I can decrypt all that traffic at scale. I can inspect it at the edge where it's being shared and edited and uploaded and stuff. And I can re-encrypt that traffic, and I can do it super fast, kind of at scale wherever you are. So that's I think the fundamental shift. If all your stuff's in the cloud, how's it talking to one another? Can I see into that traffic? That's kind of crucial.
Yeah.
And there's some fun stuff that's coming through now from a technology point of view as well. So I mean, you've got things like DSPM, so data security posture management, and a lot of people are talking about this now. And what that's starting to add into that whole equation is how do I discover everywhere that my organization has data? Like, what are all those stores, whether it's structured or unstructured, semi-structured? Yeah. Where is all that data? Who's got access to it?
Yeah.
What are they like? What's the classification? Like, what's the nature of that data? Does it align to compliance or the type of data that it is? And what are the interactions going on with that data? And so what DSPM will do from a like exciting new technology point of view is to say, you know, I've got all this visibility. Now I can assess the risk of that data and who's got it, what they're doing with it, and now prioritize it as well in terms of risk. So whether it's from a individual data storage, like where's the store level of risk, to an individual user. So you can start to, you know, you can start to prioritize what you address in terms of data risk, sort of much sooner.
Absolutely. You can start to build that picture and understand and achieve that visibility that gives organizations the starting point to be able to achieve data security. Yeah. And I think as we go on that journey, start with visibility, know your data, understand your data, classify your data, and then implement the control around your data. Yeah. So what can be accessed and what can you do with that data at a granular level? What can you do within certain applications, and what different users can have access rights, you know, at that granular level.
Yeah.
So
because it's not just, I'd say, just the user now. Like, think of GenAI, think of where that's going in terms of like agentic AI, where we're now going to allow, you know, chatbots to make autonomous decisions and like access certain different data repositories and so on for their job. So it's not only like the user now, but think of these applications almost like users. Like, what would you be comfortable with AI doing? It's why it gets so important to come back to those fundamentals around like categorization of data and understanding kind of you know, what they can access. Do you want them to access that? What should they do with it? And so on. So
absolutely. And I think one of the hottest topics at the moment is that GenAI evolution and how organizations are either taking a block all approach to large language models or trying to utilize them to increase productivity and work smarter as a business. And it's a real minefield, I think, organizations to understand, do we allow any large language models and GenAI tools to be able to enhance our working environments? But the risk there with their data is so vast, and I think there's a lot of concerns around compliance, and how can we help organizations to achieve that data security still by utilizing GenAI tools and adopting them.
Carrying on from what I mentioned a minute ago, think about AI just like any user, right? within your organization, any new user, what do you want them to have access to? What do you want them to be able to do with that data? So I think from a compliance point of view, go back to the fundamentals. Like, there might not be a lot of AI specific regulation, if you like, in terms of data security, but a lot of the fundamentals are there in terms of data privacy. So think about data residency, data sovereignty, be able to understand where those applications are, where are they hosting your data, where are they processing it. Go back to like categorization of what, and that's where things like that DSPM that we mentioned a minute ago come in so strongly around what does this data kind of align to in terms of compliance requirements. And then what do I want, like what do I want the access to look like to that data, if you like. So there's some fundamentals that are just the same for AI, the same for a new user coming to the organization, same for any new vendor, any new tech that you're kind of deploying that holds data or accesses it in some way. I think what is super important sort of within that as well is to look at the assessment of risk of those applications. So like the average organization now has around like 3,500 applications, which is like just mind-bogglingly,
isn't it?
like large number when you think what you think you access on a daily basis. And you know, like by the time you wake up in the morning, right, you've accessed your email, you've gone on like probably 10 different applications before you even get out the door. So multiply that out. But think about how you can assess risk of those applications. So is that service compliant with what you need it to be compliant with? Where is that data stored, hosted, etc.? So there's a whole raft of different areas you want to be looking at through the business continuity plans, through the disaster recovery, if your organization relies on that app. Like if you take us as an organization, we're assessing something like over 80,000 applications these days. And we're using GenAI in a lot of those cases to fast track a lot of and sort of augment that assessment. And when we look at the instances, the personal versus corporate, we've got around over 600 apps that we can now detect the instances of those applications as well. So think about that from a risk level. It's those going back to the fundamentals of data security and sovereignty, classification, access, and also this assessment of risk. Because without that, you just don't know what to prioritize.
Where to start, absolutely. I think it's really interesting thinking about Gen AI tools as another user, or large language models as another user, and that's a concept that I haven't considered before, to start thinking about what can they access, what do I want them to be able to do, just like you would any other employee and any other user. And I read a report the other day, it was by Verizon, and it said that 68% of breaches had a human element in them for causing the breach or an impact in the breach. And I think a lot of the things, if we're talking about users, is how the user and the employee environment has changed. We're not, I know it's been said so many times, but we're not all in the office anymore. We are working remotely. We're working at home. I know, absolutely. Not working in your pajamas today. So it's, how's that impacted data security? And I guess that growing landscape of what you need to secure and where your data is going and what it's touching.
Yeah, sure. I think this is where zero trust is going to come in, like so important. And that's because what zero trust is going to be able to do is allow your security to follow the data. It's not looking at the traditional perimeter anymore. It's where your data is, and that's where your users are, right? You're allowing users to work from home, work from different devices, unmanaged, managed devices, and so on. And they tend to define in a lot of ways. You got this security policy that you think's fantastic, and they're out there adopting all these different applications and using stuff that you don't necessarily know about. So zero trust is going to be, whether you're in the office all the time, hybrid, fully remote, wherever you are, it's going to be critical to providing the granular level of access, like looking at all the different attributes of a session in terms of trust of where is that person, what device are they on, what application are they using, and so on, and build the right level of access control around it. As an extension of that, one of the big problems for a remote worker is going to be your VPN, right? The half of the reason data security problems exist is people turn their VPN off because it's slow and clunky and gets in their way and so on. And so zero trust network access is the sort of, you know, the newer version, if you like, of the sort of legacy VPN from that point of view. So it's about extending those zero trust controls to private applications, because we can do all that, the great zero trust access for cloud applications. That's very, you know, relatively straightforward. If you've got private applications which you're going to have to access as a remote worker, that's where it becomes a problem. So it extends that level of adaptive sort of access control into private applications, but it's then giving you additional security benefits like not exposing the whole network, not giving you access to multiple different applications. It can be really granular in terms of user to application. So you reduce that whole risk of lateral movement. I think the only other thing I'd add on to that is I've been remote for a long time now, and you kind of get this, you know, when you're like at home and you get this like level of detachment, you get all these policies come out, but it's like, well, I'm at home. Yeah. Like, so I'll sort of, kind of pay attention to that. Maybe I will, maybe I won't, but I kind of need this application because it's going to, like, I can write this website copy or this code so much easier. I'm at home, so it's all right. And you get this level of like detachment to security policies. So think about the importance of coaching as well within that. And you mentioned like hard allow and block lists before, but if you can add coaching into that user's journey to say, it looks like you're trying to access this application or with this type of data or do this with it, is that like, you know, that carries this sort of level of risk. Here's our policy. Here's a recommendation around it. Here's an application you could be using instead of. So you're adding context. So like, you know, as we spoke earlier, like I was trying to feed my kids vegetables last night, and you can't just say no. Like you have to give a reason why is a good, like why this is a good policy and why this is a good reason. So add context into that coaching, and people respond to it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
We find that people that really respond positively to that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, you know, users, we will always try and find a way around something. If the answer is just no, or it's just block, we will always try and find a different way to, or a different application, or
pick
a
up your phone
way.
and do it on there instead.
Exactly. So having that coaching and that context is the users taking responsibility as well to be able to drive towards that security and that zero trust approach. And I think Bytes, we conducted some cybersecurity research at the end of last year, and the top 2 priorities for organizations in 2025 was securing enterprise data and adopting a zero trust approach. So the two, you know, really can go hand in hand to achieve both of those outcomes and drive organizations towards a much more secure world within their data.
Definitely. I think if you think about, you know, it's no longer just about keeping bad guys out, obviously, but it's about the access that those applications or those users have. So like going back to that point just around, just think of it as like an extension of your workforce, and how to architect around that from the start is critical.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely, it's really interesting. And I think once you've achieved visibility, it's around how can I then implement the controls that I need around my data. And I think one of the things which is really interesting is how analytics can help organizations with the control.
No, definitely. That, like, if you're excited about data security, like, analytics is just going to blow your socks off, right? And I think what makes it interesting is, like, think of all, like, where SASE, another area where their SASE really comes into its own is you've got this convergence of network and security products, right? So you've now got tons of new sensors around your environment that are all feeding like a stream of data into one central place, or one sort of central view, if you like. And what that's going to do, like, think about like your firewalls, your CASBs, your SWIGs, and so on and so on, the whole SASE kind of setup. You can, like, if we take generative AI as an example, if I'm building out a corporate policy on how AI is going to be used, I'm going to want to know what apps are actually being used within the organization, right? Like DeepSeek, just comes out of nowhere and explodes in terms of usage, right? And how am I need to see that. I need to see the trend as well associated to it. I also want to see who the users are that are accessing that, who the departments are, so I can start to gather requirements around application usage and cloud usage. But I also need to see where that data is headed, where it might be being processed, what policy actions are being triggered. So it starts to allow you to get really proactive around kind of data security from that point of view. And think about it as well from a rationalization point of view. Like if I can see all the different applications that are being used, well, I can see all the data risk within that, and I can say, these applications that we're okay with you using, I'm going to align that visibility with the assessment of risk that we mentioned as well, to say these are the applications we're comfortable with you using. So we've got all that stuff locked down, but now I can start to say, okay, well, these apps are being used by these departments, or maybe these developers are using these cloud storage services, but they're using 3. Yes. And we're paying for this enterprise license. So I can either say, I can start to rationalize my license to say, you need to use this one. We can put that coaching, we can put coaching in place to guide people to the right applications, to the right cloud services that they're using. And so you can start to secure the data across this. You can start to rationalize your licensing, and hopefully save costs right at the same time. So it's not just more efficient in terms of policy control and access control, but you're saving costs as well, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost building the context around why the users are doing what they're doing, isn't it? And understanding, okay, you're trying to use this application, so what are your needs that aren't being met by the licenses we are paying for? Or did you know that this is what we have paid for in license, so that you can maximize ROI on what you have bought, and make sure that your employees are having the most effective working experience and have the ability to access everything they need to do their job. Because if they're trying to access something else, there's that reason for it, and it's rationalizing it, isn't it?
And why is that? Gather those reasons. It might be really genuine reasons that a lot of places go through restructuring, and a lot of people need to be more efficient. And it's like with insider risk, right? We're not not always trying to be. It's not always malicious inside threat. It's just, I want to be more efficient. I want to get more done. Can you allow me to do that? And that's where workarounds happen. So it's this idea, I suppose, of, it's not no and a blanket no. It's yes, but this is how we want you to be using that. And analytics is so valuable as part of that. Yeah.
It's just intelligence for the business, isn't it? That they otherwise wouldn't have access to. Yeah. And opens up so much more context and understanding of the way their employees work and the way their business is working.
Yeah. And you'll know, you present a picture in a boardroom, and it is instantly clicks for a lot of people, where they can see this data movement, they can see the risk, and you can see the scale of the different kind of uses and where that data's flowing. It's kind of back to that point around follow the data. Security should always be following the data. It's going to be the most critical kind of asset to a lot of organizations. So follow it, visualize it, makes everyone's life a lot easier.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for joining me today, Rich. It's been fantastic to talk about data security. And I think my key takeaways really is starting with that visibility. Start at the foundation, understand your data, know where your data is residing and how it's being interacted with, and go on that journey of control and analytics to enhance your business's outputs and understanding of how your employees are working, and leading it towards that zero trust architecture of never trusting and always verifying, and the security following the data. So what about you? If there was one takeaway you'd want someone to take away from the podcast, what would it be?
I mean, I think really it's around, back to that point that we mentioned, just a lot of these technologies, don't think of them as new things, if you like. Think of them as any new technology, any new user you'd have in the organization. Go back to those fundamentals around kind of where the data is, where it's being processed, how it's categorized, so you can kind of understand where the risk is and how it's being used, and get those access controls in place. And with zero trust, you can make sure that those investments kind of align back to zero trust, then you're not ripping and replacing, right?
Yes.
You can build a strategy on that. You're never going to go out, no one's going to sell you zero trust. It's kind of, you're going to continually add to it and mature it, that strategy over time.
Yeah.
So, but if you've got that as the foundation, you're set up well.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. If anyone has any further questions, myself and Rich would love to continue the conversation. Please reach out to us on LinkedIn or reach out to your aligned Bytes account manager.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.